I worked with Anchor for a few years and we worked for a consulting firm. And Anchor joined she was like a junior developer, like the lowest level in our sort of a hierarchy thing. When she joined, and we worked together for a few years, and over those years she got promoted, and eventually she was working with the solutions architecture team of the client. And she then got a great job offer, which she couldn't refuse. Nice promotion, nice salary increase and things for this other company. So she left my company. And before she left, she invited me out to lunch. She said, John, just order whatever you want. I wanted to invite you out to lunch because I want to say thanks. Because if you hadn't given me a kick back then when we worked together and pushed me forwards, I wouldn't be where I am today. There's no way I'd be taking this job today. And that felt good. That was a great feeling. There's a theory that there's such a thing as a 10 times developer, somebody who's 10 times as good as, I don't know, a bad developer. And this is based, or let's say it's inspired by this theory, one study that somebody did in the 1960s. In fact, the names were Sackman, Erickson, and Grant. And the term caught on, 10 times developer. Of course, it's one study, it's of course debatable, but the term caught on. So the question, and I think people understand inherently that in something like knowledge work, you can have a person, or you can be quite a lot more effective than another person. There can be a big difference in effectiveness of people. And I think that's why the term caught on. I don't think we should fight about the numbers, whether it's really possible to be 10 times or 2 times or whatever. But I think when we hear this term, we think 2 questions come up, right? How can I be one? How can I be one of these ultra-effective people? The second question is, once I achieve that, will I earn 10 times as much money? So I will answer the second question. But what I really want to talk about today is the first question, okay? How can you be this person? And the discussion about this subject generally revolves around whether you can debug code well, whether you know your tools, Git, you can use your IDE well, whether you can write code effectively, whether you practice TDD, whether you do all sorts of stuff that we actually talk about in this software Werkskammer kind of discussions. I mean, we look into how to develop software efficiently, take the shortest route to solutions, all these kinds of things. And these things are great. I really recommend that you do those things. You look into those things, you try and get better in those areas. I certainly do. And I think this is the right audience. You people are interested in exactly those kind of things. Today I want to talk about a different way to become a 10 times developer, a better way even. And that is to make 5 other people 2 times developers. Isn't that a better way to achieve the goal? And in fact, if you do it right, it's even possible to make 5 people make 5 other people better developers. You can actually create an ongoing kind of a pyramid, if you want to call it that. And I've been part of that. I've been part of that kind of thing. So it is possible. So today I want to talk about how you can do that, okay? And about making your team, helping your team to be the best that your team can possibly be. So, if you want to do that, you want to improve people, you want to help people, you want people to get better. So you're talking about people learning and changing. Now, people don't always want to change naturally. They're not inherently bound to change. So the first thing we need to do is we need to create an environment in which people can change, an environment which enables people to change. Before I go there, this is an ad that Atlassian ran in the New York Times. They ran a full-page ad in the New York Times with this ad. And I like it because It's true. Now, that's they make team software, okay? They make tools for teams, so it's logical that they would run an ad like that. But I looked at it and I said, that is so true. Because today, nobody is really interested in how much you, as an individual, produce or do, right? Actually, nobody's going to look in the Git history and check how many commits you did or how many lines of code you changed or anything else. Nobody cares. Today, we all work in teams. And the output, which is measured, the output which is important to the business, is no individual output, it's the output of the team. Did the team achieve the business goal? Did the team bring value to the business? That's what matters. And so that's what we really need to be focusing on. And I can tell you that when one day we have a flying car, it will be built by a team. It will be programmed by a team. It will not be programmed by an individual. And any reasonably important software today is programmed by teams. That's how we work. So, how do we create this team environment? Well, I think this is an inspirational quote. The only thing is, I think the object is to make art. Okay, not in the sense that code is art, but your object is to get somewhere, but you don't get there directly. So he's saying you don't make art by trying to make art, you make art by getting into a state in which art just inevitably happens. And it's the same with becoming an effective team. It's the same with progressing as a team. We need to get into a state where these things can happen, where learning can happen. A state in which people can, for example, admit failure. People can fail. We talk about failure culture in DevOps kind of, when people talk about DevOps. It's very important that people can fail and not be afraid of that and not be afraid to admit that. Or you can admit lack of knowledge. How many of you feel comfortable to tell your team, yeah, I don't know. I don't know how that works. I don't know about that technology. There are teams where that's something you don't want to do because you don't want to sort of show that weakness or whatever. And there are other teams where you can just openly admit that. You can just say that. And that's okay. So this guy is named David Marquette. This guy has an interesting story to tell about, I don't know. He was a US Navy submarine captain. And he was trained to become a captain, but then he was trained for the submarine he was going to take over. He studied that submarine for a year, a nuclear submarine. And he knew by the end of that time, he knew every pipe and where it leads, every button, what it does, everything, because that's how it works in the Navy. The captain, he knows. And when there's a problem, you can always be sure the captain will be able to bark out the correct orders to solve that problem. You can always go to the captain. He knows. And he leads, tells people what to do. So this guy was about to get on, it was like 2 weeks before his first assignment as a captain on this boat that he'd been preparing for so long. And the Navy rings him up and says, do you know what? We've got a bit of a problem. The captain of the worst submarine in our whole fleet has just quit. And actually, we need a new captain there, so we're going to shift you over to that submarine. Only problem was it was a completely different submarine. It was also a nuclear submarine, but it was a completely different one. All the things he'd learned about the tubes and the wires and the buttons and all that stuff didn't apply anymore. So he had to come up with a new leadership style. He gave an order on the second day on the submarine, and the order didn't make any sense. He told them to go 1/3 speed. There was no 1/3 speed. But the guy that was next to him and knew there was no 1/3 speed passed the order on. 1/3 speed, 1/3 speed, and passed it down the chain. That was the kind of way that they worked on that submarine. And he said, they had a meeting after that, a crisis meeting, and said, something's got to change here because you're trained to obey orders and I don't know anything about the submarine. So we're going to get ourselves killed. This is a nuclear submarine. And from that point on, he decided never to give any more orders. He trained the people, or he told the people to tell him what they were going to do. So they were to express their intent. I intend to submerge the submarine. He was okay. So he changed a bit. Anyway, it's a fascinating book. This is the book. Turn the Ship Around. Fascinating book. I recommend it, about leadership. And he says that what are the three most powerful words a leader can say? Get it done. No, not get it done. The three most powerful words a leader can say are, I don't know. Because when you admit that you don't know, you make it safe for everyone in your organization to admit, or everyone under you, if you're the leader, to admit that they don't know. If the captain doesn't know, why am I supposed to? I don't have to know either. And it's very important that people admit that they don't know, because if you want to learn something, you have to accept that you need to learn. It's very difficult to learn if you think you know everything. Right? You might know people like that think they know everything. They're not really interested in learning, are they? Right? So it's very important that you can say, I don't know. And it's very important that in your software team, that people can say, I don't know, or can feel, I don't know, or can be unafraid to say that. That's why he said it's the most powerful thing a leader can do. He's got a lot of other interesting leadership insights, by the way, this guy. So we want to create that environment where you can say, I don't know, where you can fail. And if you have problems empathizing with that, perhaps you're in a role where you know everything, where you've been there for a long time and everybody asks you the questions and you know, that can be unhealthy because it becomes hard to empathize with people who really don't know. The best thing you can do is go to another role where you're out of your depth. Go somewhere where you really don't know, you're really new. And then you learn a lot on one side and you suddenly can empathize with people that don't know. I'm working at CodeCentric, as you saw on the first slide. I came in, of course, when you go to the interviews, you try to convince them you know everything and you're wonderful and they should pay you lots of money and all these kind of things. And then I got into the office and there were a lot of people there that knew a lot of stuff that I didn't know. And I felt suddenly like I should pretend to know these things. Yes, with the Kubernetes deployments, we just do this and that. But I fought that. I really had to fight that temptation because I'm not going to do that. And they were very welcoming. I mean, there was no bad environment around not knowing. And nevertheless, there's this temptation. There's such a thing called imposter syndrome, you know? There's this kind of, it's well known. In fact, everybody, I think, experiences it sooner or later, that you feel like you're supposed to know, you're supposed to be in this position, you're supposed to something. People expect this, but you don't really feel like you know it, and you feel like an imposter. And a lot of architects run into this problem, by the way. Just a little tip for developers if you're dealing with architects. You know, architects are these guys, they across like 5 different projects, they're not really fully in any of them, but they write rules. You know, you've all got to do this and this and this, and you've all got to use this technology, and you've all got to do that. And sometimes the rules they make up don't make any sense. They're actually not very good. Because the problem that architects have is they were once coders and everything and in touch with everything, but in the meantime, they've kind of got to this stage where they don't really touch the code anymore. So they've got this, they do a lot of meetings and they meet with managers and they also do this other thing. And so sometimes that results in them not making the best decisions. And they're these kind of senior guys. So they've got to look like they know. Sometimes they're brought in as expensive consultants. They've got to look like they know. And this can lead to a dangerous situation where they try to show that they know or they refuse to admit that they don't know. And so I had the problem. Well, I found out at some point I was dealing with, had architects who were making up kind of, you know, these rules and guidelines which weren't very good, or which I didn't think were very good. But at some point I realized that the architects are doing a really important job. These architects that don't code, I mean, they're doing a really important job in that they're having meetings with people. So I don't have to have meetings with those people. You know, they're saving me. They're like creating this defensive shield from the managers and all these kind of people. And I really started to appreciate that. And then I noticed that they were fulfilling a role which is actually necessary in an organization. And when I reflected that back to the architects and when I let them know that I appreciated what they were doing, suddenly there was a different tone. Because suddenly they didn't have to defend their positions or show me that they were, you know, that they knew what's going on. They realized they were okay. Their position was stable. They had nothing to defend. Suddenly we were able to work together and they were able to accept my suggestions. So it's amazing what you can achieve with a troublesome person. And I don't want to just pick on architects. I take that example because I had that experience. Lots of architects that don't fall into that category, I'm sure. But it's amazing if you have a troublesome relationship with somebody, how you can turn it around by basically confirming them in their position, by making them feel comfortable. So, speaking of that subject, Google did a big study. Some of you might have heard of it. It was called Aristotle. They wanted to figure out what makes a perfect team, what makes a team really effective. So they looked at heaps of stuff like, what if we put together all the best individual performers into one team? Then we'd have like the ultimate team, wouldn't we? You know? That turned out not to be true. Actually, their study turned out to show that the individual performance had no measurable, no notable impact on team performance. Didn't matter how good the individuals were. They measured heaps of stuff. They measured, this is the result of what actually mattered in Google, okay? Now, Google has decent developers in the first place, okay? So it's not fair to compare that with people that have never developed code or something. But Google, they measured stuff like whether people take decisions together as a group or whether one person decides for everybody. Whether people drink a beer together after work or whether they don't. Whether they're co-located or whether they're remote. How many, what's the ratio of men and women in the group, and all sorts of other things that you think might be important. And none of them were significant, statistically significant in this Google study. These are the only things that were statistically significant. And this one is in a special color, psychological safety, because it was by far the most important. And psychological safety, basically, it says what they say there, or basically it means you feel safe to admit weakness, to say something different, to say, I don't agree with that, what the group is saying, to say things like that people feel safe to do that and they won't be looked down upon or whatever, feel stupid or something like that. So that's pretty interesting. I found this at the Codecentric office, like just this afternoon. I was just there and I photographed this thing. I didn't have time to put the photo in. It's actually longer, but I thought it was really cool. It's in the co-working office. It's at the Kremer Loft, where the co-working space Codecentric is, there in Erfurt. And I found that quite interesting. I found a really cool sign because a lot of those things go along the same sort of thing. Now, I want to talk about conversational turn-taking. This is a really interesting subject. One of the things that the Google study figured out is that there's a high correlation between conversational equivalence of conversational turn-taking, as they call it, and these effective psychologically safe teams. Now, this conversational turn-taking thing means, basically, if you've got a meeting or group of people talking, everybody talks around about the same amount as each other. Think about the meetings that you attended recently. Did everybody talk around about the same amount in that meeting? Or was it mainly 2 people, 3 people talking and everyone else just watching? Actually, most of the time, there are always a few people that don't talk. They just sort of sit there and sort of feel uncomfortable. They're not really sure to speak up or anything. So, what I do is, in meetings, I've got this sort of new thing. Actually, it's not new anymore. But what I do in meetings, since I learned about this, I participate in the meeting, as in the content, but it's like my secondary goal to get everybody to talk around about the same amount as each other. This is quite a challenge. It starts before the meeting. It starts by limiting meetings to small amounts of people, because it's impossible to get a group of 9 people together and they all speak around about the same amount. Basically, it doesn't happen. You can have a lecture, that's okay. It's not a meeting, it's a lecture like this, okay, no worries. But if you don't have a meeting where people work together, then you need to cut that meeting down to the people that really need to be there and are going to participate. And other people you might need to have on call, you can have them on call in another room. I don't know. But that's the first thing you need to do. Second thing is, I've developed a few tactics. So you can ask the quiet people a question. I'm one of the people that talks a lot, right? So sometimes you see some quiet person and you say, hey, Sarah, what do you think about that? What you shouldn't ask Sarah in this case is, do you agree? Because you know what Sarah's going to say. Yes. That was the end of that, right? So you ask them an open-ended question, so they have to answer. That works well. Or there's another trick I know. What I do is sometimes people are talking, and they're discussing this subject. Should we use solution A or solution B? And basically, solution A and B they're more or less the same to me. Like, I don't really care. So they're talking back and forth. And then I go, I agree with Miloš, but Miloš hasn't actually said anything up until that point. So everybody looks at Miloš. And then Miloš says, I think solution A would be good, you know. So you can develop your own strategies, but try to think of that. It actually has started to pervade my life. Like, I don't just do it at work, also in social circumstances and things like that. It's becoming something, even in my company Slack. I recently tried to get some people to talk less and other people to talk more. So yeah, and it really works. It really works. It really makes meetings more effective, and it makes them feel better. It makes the people feel like the meeting was better, and it just gives a better team feeling. Let's talk about remote teams. That's a team of remotes. So, no, that's the remote team. There they are. You know remote teams, right? We use them a lot in Germany because, you know, we're expensive and there aren't many software developers in Germany, so we don't have enough, so we have to find some more. So we find them all in a cheap country. And in these cheap countries, English is not their first language. And then we involve them in the meetings, don't we? We get WebEx or something, and they dial in. And they're sitting there in some faraway country with their headphones on, and the speaker's here, and the people are standing here, and some of what they're saying is coming across, and these people in their non-native language are standing there trying to understand for minutes or hours on end. And it's horrible. And then they don't say anything. You think, why don't those people on the end of the line say anything? Because first of all, they can't see who's speaking. They don't even know how many people are in the room anymore. They don't know who said what. They don't, of course, see the facial expressions. They don't understand everything because of the audio problems and everything. And in the end, they just give up. And they say, oh, I'll ask those guys later. You know, the guys from my team will tell me later or whatever, you know. I hate it. I've seen it too many times. I hate it. So, in my current team, we have some remote team people as well. They're in Bosnia and Herzegovina. I said, on this project, there will be no second-class citizens. We will have only first-class citizens on this project. Because it's like that, right? You have the people in remote, they're the second-class citizens. So no way, I'm not doing it. So what happened is, we started to use video conference so that they could see us. So we use Zoom, but you can use anything. And started putting cameras on, and that improved a lot. That really helped them a lot, actually. I really recommend it. But we had a problem. The Wi-Fi connection we were using on the client side was, of course, not that great. It's overloaded, and so every now and then the connection drops out a bit, or you miss something, or whatever. And so then it needs to be repeated. You know, and you might think if it only happens every 20 minutes, it's not so bad. But actually, that's really bad, because if every 20 minutes you have to sit there and figure out what was missed and repeat it, it's extremely frustrating and it's a total waste of time. And I said, no, let's just get a router. So we bought an LTE router for, I don't know, not much money. And we pay 60 or 70 euros a month. We have unlimited data. So we have a beautiful LTE connection now, just for ourselves, and everything works flawlessly, perfectly. That might not work where you are. Maybe you don't have the possibility to just plug in a router and plug stuff into it. I don't know. But don't accept crappy solutions, connection solutions for remote developers. Just say where you're working, just say, if you don't let me integrate these people fully into my team, I'm not going to work with them. You can put them in another team, the remote team. They can be all by themselves, and I'll work with people here in Erfurt or wherever you live. But if it's going to be a combined mixed remote team, it's got to be a perfect quality that they can be first-class citizens. Perfect communication. So that's what I recommend. Anyway, we had a meeting one day. We started with the cameras, but after it was like 2 or 3 hour meeting, there was some kind of really long meeting, and then there was supposed to be a retrospective, you know? And you know what everybody says after like painful 3 hours of meeting. Retrospective? Can we skip the retrospective? And I said, no, no skipping the retrospective. Okay, never skip the retrospective. What you can do, if people want to skip the retrospective because they're tired or whatever, or they have no time, just do a quick one. Just have a targeted retrospective on a certain subject. Just say, this is what we're going to talk about it for 20 minutes. Some of the best retrospectives happen like that. So in this case, as they were all like, long meeting, I said, well, what was the problem with the meeting? And we just started talking about the meeting, and that was our retrospective. And they said, well, we can't see the people all the time. Sometimes people speak and they're not on camera, and this and that. And so we came up with these rules. The video meeting rules, here they are on the wall behind my desk. The 10-minute rule, the 30-second rule, and the 45-minute rule. And enforcement, I'm going to go through them so you don't have to read this. And enforcement is everyone's responsibility. So, 10-minute rule. If a remote participant doesn't say anything for 10 minutes, it probably means that he's lost track of what's going on. So what do? You ask him to give a summary of what you talked about for the last 10 minutes. The 30-second rule is, if someone speaks off camera for more than 30 seconds, we stop the meeting. You just interrupt them, stop the meeting, and say, no, we have to stop, we have to adjust the technical setup. And then we adjust everything, and we get everybody on camera, and we continue. So we use just our laptop cameras, and actually, if we sort of all cuddle together a bit, we can get 3 people on one camera. You know? So it works, it's possible. And the 45-minute rule is every 45 minutes we have a break. I have to admit we haven't done that so strictly. In fact, none of the rules we've been really strict about. This one is because if you're on the end of another line, struggling to understand English and everything, it is more intense for your brain than if you can just see people and relax a bit, you know? And so they need that to have a break. People I live in Frankfurt, the flight air traffic controllers, they get a break every 10 or 15 minutes because it's intense brain work. Now, I don't think we can compare that exactly to our example, but just to show, sometimes people need a break on a regular basis. So we haven't actually strictly enforced any of the rules, to be fair, okay? But we're all aware of them. The client is very aware of them, the whole team's aware of them, and everybody has been really participative. And because of those rules, we have actually avoided the situation where they need to be enforced. So people are very conscious of, are the people in remote following? Are they saying anything? And even the guys that are remote occasionally do it to me if I don't say something for a while in a meeting. Then they ask me a question and say, hey, well, what do you think? And then they, oh. So, yeah, that really works. So we've got first-class citizens only in my project. And the question is, how do you think, as two guys in Bosnia, how do you think these 2 guys in Bosnia feel about the way we're treating them? They feel pretty good. They're very much happy to be part of the team and be in the project. So, next question. Is this stuff which I'm talking about, is that just for leaders? Yeah? Or is it for everyone? To that, I'm going to ask you a question. What is a leader? Oops, that's the wrong slide. We'll come to the leaders later. We'll go with the slides. I'll tell you about something else. The most powerful tool I know, but it's not a buzzword. It's not a software tool that you can apply. It's another kind of tool. And it's never lost its effectiveness. Praise. When was the last time you praised somebody? You said, hey, that's really great what you did or what you're doing, whatever. I really want you to reflect on that for a second. When was the last time you praised somebody? Praise is super effective. It's life-changing. I experienced it myself, and I try to make sure I praise people. And people ask me, if I talk about that, sometimes people ask me, yeah, but you shouldn't fake it. Like, you shouldn't say something false. And my question then is everybody in your team so bad at everything that you can't find anything where you could actually praise them genuinely for? That's not possible, okay? So actually, there's a lot of things you could praise people for if you just thought about it and made an effort to do it. So I try to make an effort. And there are a lot of ways you can do it besides the obvious way, okay? To just go and say something to the person. You can talk about a solution. If you're discussing software solutions or whatever, you can say, instead of saying, I think we should use the binary search, you say, I think we should use the solution that Bob came up with, okay? And Bob feels good because you used his name. There's two ways to say exactly the same thing. Or you can say, somebody says something which you've been basically trying to say, right? You can say, that's what I'm trying to say. Or you can say, yeah, that's right. That's a good idea. That's what I say. What about code review? How do you conduct code review? You know, when we conduct code review, of course, we're looking for bugs. If you read about code review, it's to make sure we eliminate bugs before they get to production. Okay? So we find things and we criticize them. That's wrong. That needs to be changed. Blah, blah, blah. But what about saying, hey, that's really good. Hey, I didn't think of that. Now, I write these into I don't really do code review anymore. We do pair programming, but I used to. And I write this stuff in. Hey, that's a really good idea. And I'm going to use that. Stuff like that. Try to put in, as a challenge for you, as many positive things as negative things. I never managed, right? It's really difficult. But it's a good goal to have. And it changes the feeling of code review. Sometimes code review can be absolutely acidic. I don't know, it's absolutely horrible if you've got a bad culture in your team. Another thing you can do is retrospectives. Retrospectives are a great time to praise people because it's a time when everybody's reflecting on things, and everybody's listening, the whole team's there, and you can say, hey, like I said today, as an example, hey, that was really good the way Marcelo did the work last night and blah, 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 and explain something. And that's also a good way to praise people. Or you can use kudos cards. That's a real kudos card from my project that somebody wrote. It's just, you get these cards and they help you to write stuff on them because, I don't know, it's like a little prop. So we've got some at work. Or you can come up with crazy ideas like I had at a previous project I was on. We were on a sort of a project. It was one of the first agile projects in an organization. The people came out of a management waterfall mentality. They waited to be given jobs. And I wanted them to change into see a job on the Jira board and just take it, initiative. Just do it because it needs doing, not waiting for someone to tell me what to do. So I came up with this concept which I called aggressive task self-assignation. ATSA. Okay? It's not just I do the jobs, it's give me those jobs. Self-assign those jobs. So I made this trophy here. I ordered this thing online, the ATSA award. Here these guys, they're pulling the tasks to themselves. That's the idea. Across the Jira board, they're pulling those tasks. And this is to be given to the most aggressive task self-assigner. And one day in the retrospective, after the retrospective, I said, hey, I got this thing made, and I'd like to give it to Ulrika today because I think she was the most aggressive task self-assigner in this sprint. And Ulrika, at the end of this sprint, the next sprint, I want you to give it to someone else. And she did. And every retrospective, the ATSA award got passed on again and again. And I tell you what, it had a massive effect. The people really changed their mentality, and the people really started doing this, started really attempting to self-assign tasks, and the praise aspect was fantastic. The people really appreciated that. So you can be creative. In different ways you can praise people. This is also from my ATSA project, keep calm and self-assign. Now there's this thing called sandwich feedback. I want to mention that briefly. Sandwich feedback is when you want to say something to somebody which is negative, but you know that they won't necessarily listen. So you say something positive first to sort of warm them up. Then you say the negative thing, which you really wanted to say. And then you say something positive again at the end. It's like a sandwich, you see? And people use this technique because it's effective. It actually works, right? People are more likely to listen if you say something positive before the negative thing. But it's a bit false, isn't it? Like, you didn't really want to say the positive thing. You're just saying it so that you can say the negative thing. And if you know what they're doing, it's also a bit offensive, to be honest. I don't like it. I have to admit it's occasionally necessary. If you have no relationship with somebody, it's a good way to do things. But if you've got a relationship with somebody, then there's a much better way. You just say the negative thing to them directly. Just tell them how bad it was. Like that, the full German way, really direct. And it works because if you've created an environment in which the people know they're valued, where they know that where you praise people just because, and the people know they're appreciated, then it's very easy to say something negative, and the people, they're happy to take that. They listen. So I recommend to you all to have a life-changing experience in the next 24 hours. Praise somebody. Think of something good somebody did and go to them and tell them how happy you are about what they did. And it really will change your life or their life. I really mean it. Okay, so I reckon the job of a senior person is to train people, is to teach people to be better developers, to be better at what they do. And I think that training courses are good. You can go to training courses and you can learn how to use, Kafka or MongoDB or whatever for a few days. If you don't apply it straight after, you forget it all. And actually you forget some of it anyway, right? Because it's like intense 3 days of learning and then, apply. There's a better way to do it, which is on-the-job training, which is really what we're talking about. So if we can teach people every day a little bit, we can learn from each other and teach each other. That's far more effective than like an official training course. And let me see what my next slide is. Oh yeah, this is the leadership stuff. Okay, and if people can learn, if people feel that they can learn, that in your team they're learning, that in their job they're learning, then they want to stay there. At least the kind of people that you want to have, they want to stay. Because you want to have knowledgeable people. Knowledgeable people, by definition, want to learn. And so they're going to go to places and stay in places where they can learn. And when they realize, I cannot learn anything here anymore, they'll leave and find a place where they can learn. So that's why we want to create an environment where people know that they're learning and can learn. See? And then we increase retention, which is good, which is going to bring me to pair programming. But first, we need to talk about Florian. This guy's also in my team. That's Florian. He likes to do stand-up paddle. He likes to windsurf as well. Now, these principles, they can be applied by leaders. They can be actually applied by everybody. What is a leader? That's a good question. So I reckon Florian is a leader. Because Florian, every time he goes to the beach and does his windsurfing or his stand-up paddle, he spends half an hour before or after cleaning stuff up. So here's what he cleaned up when he was in Denmark one day recently. He took a photo of it, gave it to me. Because he says, people come to him. People came to him in Denmark. This was a couple of months ago. A lot of people came to him because he was there every day at the beach doing this stuff. A lot of people came to him and said, what are you doing? They thought he was employed to do that. He said, no, I just like water sports, I like the beach, and we've got a plastic problem. So every day, this is what I do. So explain what he does. And people were like, wow, that's cool. I'm going to do that too. And one guy even went straight back to his camper van, got a rubbish bag, came out, and so Florian's walking in this direction, and this guy walks in the other direction and starts picking up rubbish as well. And at the end, they came back together, they saw each other, and they compared their rubbish piles. And not only in Denmark, he's influenced people here well, not here, but in Frankfurt, where he lives. He's also got a few other people on the boat that they also do the same thing. But he doesn't have any authority. He never told anybody to do anything. He doesn't have a title. He just started doing something which he thought was good, and other people saw it and were inspired by that and followed that. That's leadership. Florian is a leader. You can be a manager or a CEO or whatever and not really be a leader. Leader is somebody who people choose to follow. So actually, I'll tell you about another leader. This is another guy on my team. He's called Dejan. And Dejan, he knows all the shortcuts on his IDE. I mean, he knows all the shortcuts. Like, he knows shortcuts that you have to use both hands and your foot to press all the keys, And I thought that was pretty cool. Actually, I was a bit jealous when I started working with Dan. I was like, this guy knows more shortcuts than me. This is no good. This is no good. So I've got to learn. And so we started, I started learning from him, and we had this culture where now sometimes if you do something with your mouse, he says, no, undo. Do it like this, control, blah, 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 blah. And Actually, he said to me today that he thinks that I'm better with shortcuts now than him, which I don't think is true, but it shows that he inspired me. He inspired me to get better. And he inspires quite a few people, actually, I found out. So he's a leader as well. In this case, I was the follower. Now, we've only got about 6, 7 people in our team. So apparently we've got a lot of leaders in our team. And is that really possible? Actually, it is. You can only have one person. If one person, if you've got to have someone that makes decisions and tells everyone, this is the decision, this is the way, that's what we're going to go, you can only have one of them in a team. You can't have 2 people making conflicting decisions. And that's fair enough. There's nothing wrong with having people like that in a team. But in terms of leaders that just lead away and others follow, everybody can be a leader. The whole team can be leaders, and maybe we all are. And maybe you all can be leaders in some way or other. You don't need anyone to give you a title. You don't need anyone to give you a salary raise. Maybe you do need a salary raise, but you don't need it to become a leader. You can just become a leader tomorrow at your job by doing some of these principles which are going to lead your team to become better. Let's talk about pair programming. Pair programming is a good way to teach people to program. When you do pair programming, you should try out, let's see, I don't want to talk for too much longer, so I'm going to skip through this quickly. Try something else. Try, the person on the keyboard is only doing what the person watching says. If you've got the experience pair programming that one person just programs and does it and the other guy's sort of watching and trying to figure out what's going on, try switching that around. Try that one person's giving the instructions, ideally sort of high-level instructions, like write a test for this, and the other person's doing it. And then switching that around. You can really learn a lot like that. If you're the senior person, try to let the student, if you've got a lot more experience, try to let the other person decide things as much as possible. Like sometimes I say to someone, this is covered by an integration test already there, but we could write a unit test for it. What do you think? What should we do? And then that person says, yeah, no, we won't write a test. It's okay, we won't write a test. For some things, it's not really critical one way or the other. Let them decide. Gives them a feeling of, wow, I'm important here. I can do this. And then, by the way, it's a little trick. When a really important decision comes, then like if someone else has been deciding all the time, there's this kind of human nature that you can say something. I think we should not use COBOL on this project. And people sort of they listen to you because you're not the whole time saying, do this, making all the decisions. That's a little trick. So, now I want to tell you, that's a nice little quote in respect to what I just said. Now I want to tell you about the Israeli army. I want to tell you a little secret. How to identify high potential developers before anyone else. Okay? This is going to give you an advantage in the market. Okay? Here come the secrets. This is scientific, by the way. There was a study. This guy, Dov Eden, went to the Israeli Defense Force in the 1980s. And they still have mandatory military service. And he took the people that do the first initial training, takes 3 months, and he took all the life curriculum, CVs and all the facts about these people. I have lots of details about the recruits that were coming into the army, and he studied them all. And after he studied all this stuff about each person, he told the Israeli army, he told the instructors who were the high potentials in that group. And it turns out he was right. The high potentials were 9% higher on expertise tests, whatever that is, and 10% higher on the weapons evaluation at the end of the 3 months. So he nailed it pretty well there. And he based his method, I'm going to tell you what the method was in a minute, he based it on something called Pygmalion in the Classroom, which is a study done in 1965 with kindergarten students who did a Harvard cognitive ability test, so like an IQ test, basically. And they all did this test, and then after a year, they all did the same kind of intelligence test, so they were compared. And at the start, when they were doing the first test, the researchers gathered again all sorts of details about the students, studied all these details, and then told the teachers, here are the high potentials. These ones they have the potential for intellectual blooming, as they called it. There were 20% of them that they said, these are the ones that have the potential for intellectual blooming. And after a year, they had gained 50% more points in this, like everybody gained because they all got older and got smarter, but the high potentials had gained 50% more than the other ones. It's a famous study. So the question is, how did they work out who the high performance potentials were? The answer to that question is random selection. In both cases, they ignored completely all the data which they'd taken, and they just randomly selected people and told the instructors or the teachers, these are the high potentials. These are the ones that are going to bloom intellectually. So the only difference between all the people was the perception of the teachers, the trainers. That's quite astounding. It has quite astounding implications for us. And in fact, people have reproduced these kind of studies in the workplace. And guess what? They had the same results. People have reproduced similar results in a work environment. If the people instructing, if the teachers, whatever, managers, think that somebody's a high potential, they're much more likely to achieve more. Perhaps they interpret failure as another opportunity to learn. Perhaps they motivate these people more. Perhaps, I don't know. But that's what happens. It happens more if they don't know the people at all first. If the instructors in the study, they have a good knowledge of the people beforehand, then it doesn't work as well to tell them this guy's high potential or something. Okay, that's what studies have found out. Nevertheless, you can have high potentials for free. Isn't that good? You don't have to fire anyone. You don't have to do anything. You can turn all your employees into high potentials just by believing they're high potentials. That's amazing. Yeah, this guy lived in Frankfurt. Wait, I'll give you the German one. Now, so since we're recording in English, I'll put the English one up for a minute. Now we're coming to the question you've all been waiting for the answer to. Coming to the end, but before we end, this is really important, isn't it? Will you earn 10 times the salary once you're a 10 times developer? Huh? Well, there's good news and bad news. Or let's start with the bad news. The bad news is, not really. Not really. But it's true that if you are in a few teams, and in those teams, things go well, and the team is effective, and people see that in the teams you're in, the results are created. And after a while, people work that out, and it helps in salary negotiations and things like that. So it's definitely helpful. But you're not going to earn 10 times the amount. But the good news is, I know how you can send your salary through the roof. I've got another scientific study for you. And it's on the next slide, okay? It's a slide, it's taken from the O'Reilly European Developer Survey from 2016 or something, because I think they stopped doing them now, but they were doing them every year and asking developers all sorts of questions and deriving statistics out of that. Now we're going to see a statistic, and I'm not going to explain the slide. You're going to look at the slide, and you will immediately know how to dramatically raise your salary. Are you ready? You know you want to. You know you want to. Isn't that exciting? Over 20 hours a week, you're in that golden zone. So, at the start, I told you that we don't want to create art. The object isn't to create art. It's to be in that wonderful state in which art becomes inevitable. I want to show you a bit of art. This is on a project that I was on, where we had, I would call it this kind of 10 times team. Some guy just drew this, and he brought it to the retrospective. We had crazy retrospectives in that team. We had retrospectives because the Scrum Master just didn't do anything, so we just took over. And And the one guy, well, one time we had an origami retrospective. We were all making origami. And this particular one, this guy brings this thing, and he'd drawn this at home, and there were all this stuff like database mountains, DAP canyon. DAP was a system there, canyons, meeting lake, architect stronghold, and estimation bay, you know. Why did he draw that? I don't really know why he drew it, but I like it. And yet I do know why he drew it. Because we'd come into a state in that team in which art had become inevitable. It was inevitable. We'd got into a team, the team had got into a state that we weren't just doing routine software development, we were doing 10 times software development. So that's it. Thank you. Question?
I may have an annotation about meeting sizes.
Yeah.
I just recently read an article about the meeting culture at Amazon, and Jeff Bezos has this 2 pizza rule,
Yeah.
where you can only get as many people into a meeting which can be fed with 2 pizzas. If 2 pizzas are too little, it's too many people. I don't think that's too much in my eyes, because as soon as there are, I don't know, more than 6 or 7 people, your time slots are too small to say something, and people who think they're more important and speak more and stuff like that. And I have another thing. What kind of hypocrite are you? You have a crappy internet connection and you buy an LTE router, but you cramp in front of a crappy laptop camera? I've been working in remote teams for a long time.
Yeah.
It's just as recently we built a new office in Leipzig where I'm the head of, and now I have my own team there. But I usually was just the remote guy, even sometimes the remote software architect, which had its own challenges. But I always invested in a good webcam, because you totally lose touch with a bad picture. Like the other, I saw it with the reactions with the other people. When I got a good camera with a wide angle, people were way more immersed in conversations when they did not look at a totally crappy picture of me.
That's interesting.
That worked. That made the whole thing way better. And microphone.
Does the recording pick that up, what he's saying? Is it picked up yet?
Microphone, very important. How
Yes.
good microphone.
Yes.
If the other person is not understanding you well, they are less likely to listen properly. And this is really important, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I just want to agree with you about the microphone. I know people that do a lot of remote pair programming or remote mob programming, and they buy studio quality microphones. We've got really, the people in Bosnia now bought very expensive headsets, which they like much more. And we're using in the room, we're using a Jabra microphone. I'm not happy with it, but I don't know what I looked around for a while for a better solution for a microphone where you can sort of hear from a long way away, or I wanted to get a mic array, and maybe afterwards we can talk about it in detail, because I would like to know what the best solution is. I bought something which I sent back because it was rubbish.
I don't know either.
Okay. It's tricky when you've got a long distance. I mean,
yeah. It's really hard.
And regarding cameras, we use our Macs, and we found that the picture's acceptable. It hasn't been a problem. But I also haven't tried a higher quality camera, so it might be even better.
One of the plus sides of the camera is you can move it around a little.
Yes.
It gives you more flexibility to show stuff. We can fit more people on it because it's wide angle, stuff like that.
That's true, and in fact, we sometimes have someone's using a whiteboard, and then somebody generally, actually this is where the team really switched in after we made our rules, and somebody will get a tablet and join the meeting with the tablet and then be standing there, or just turn a camera around with the laptop. It's a bit painful. I mean, the good thing is the culture's there, the people do it. But of course, something like a movable camera would be much better.
Just a recommendation.
Yeah.